Just what exactly is the future of regulation for artificial intelligence in a tiny country at the bottom of the world? That's kind of what we're exploring today on the Data Radio Show. Hello there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Data Radio Show. Last week I had the privilege of being invited down to the capital city, to the Parliament building for Aotearoa, New Zealand, which is where I live, to be part of a conference from AI leaders and industry experts on the future of regulation and rollout of artificial intelligence and the impacts that it would have on our very small economy here. And there's some really interesting stuff that came out. Now, I've been waiting a week or so to put this out because I was hoping for some help from some artificial intelligence myself into seeing what the results of that particular conference were when we got the summary information. And there was some really fascinating stuff that came through on there. And Artificial Intelligence's Notebook LM podcast breakdown is really spot on. But it highlighted something that I wasn't expecting. That difference between what the public perception is around artificial intelligence versus what people who work within the industry and people who have already adopted artificial intelligence is, and the gap between the two. So that's what the majority of this is actually exploring this week. So before we jump over to that, make sure you hit that like button on the video, to share the video or subscribe to the channel so that you can keep getting updates. And yeah, let's jump over and see what the analysis was.
You know, it's really quite striking to see how seriously New Zealand is engaging with the rise of artificial intelligence. It's not just some fringe discussion. They seem to be actively trying to shape the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, take that recent industry-led conference the Labour Party hosted, April 7th in Wellington.
Right, I saw that. It felt like a pretty significant first step, didn't it, in figuring out their whole approach?
Exactly.
And what was really notable, I thought, was just the sheer variety of people they got in the room. It wasn't just, politicians hashing it out.
Right.
You had Chris Hipkins, the labor leader, sure. But also Frances Valentine. She's an education futurist, thinking long-term.
Okay.
Then reps from the NZ AI Forum, right in the thick of it, industry-wise. The Public Service Association, looking at the workforce angle. Even the Young New Zealander of the Year.
Wow, that's quite a mix.
It is. And that kind of diverse attendance really signals they're aiming for a broad, maybe inclusive start to tackling this tech.
It really does. And that's exactly what we're digging into today. We've got the key takeaways from that conference.
Right. Gives a glimpse into that level of thinking.
Yeah, and we've paired it with this really fascinating AI survey report from Talbot Mills Research. Just out, April 2025.
Ah, okay. So fresh data on public and expert views.
Exactly. It gives us that snapshot. So the goal for this deep dive is basically to pull out the most important nuggets from both of these sources.
Okay.
So you can quickly get, a solid handle on where New Zealand seems to be positioned with AI right now.
Makes sense. So we'll be looking at what? The economic side?
Yep, the potential economic boost, which sounds huge.
Okay. And the ethics, I assume. Governance.
Definitely. Critical questions there, plus the future of work for Kiwis.
Right. Upskilling and all that.
And that unique angle Macquarie data sovereignty, which seems really important in their context.
Very important.
And maybe one of the most interesting bits, how the general public's views sometimes really differ from the AI thinkers, as the report calls them.
Ah, that perception gap. Yeah, that's always fascinating.
So yeah, let's jump right in. Maybe let's start with that economic potential. That was a big focus at the conference, right?
It certainly was. And the numbers they floated were definitely eye-catching.
How big are we talking?
Well, the range they mentioned was anywhere from about $39 billion up to $102 billion added to the New Zealand economy.
Wow. Over the next decade.
Over the next decade, yeah. That's a huge range, obviously, but even the bottom end...
Still massive.
It's a massive figure. So it immediately tells you why this is such a critical area for policy and discussion.
Absolutely. And how does that optimism compare to what the Talbot Mills survey found?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. You see this difference in sort of optimism levels.
Okay.
The report splits responses between the general public and these AI thinkers. People probably working in AI research or just following it super closely. And what the survey shows is that these AI thinkers, they're significantly more positive about the economic benefits, much more so than the general public.
Really, across the board.
Pretty much. The survey said that on every single potential benefit they tested, the AI thinkers were more positive.
Huh. Can you give a specific example? Where's that gap really obvious?
Sure. Take the idea of economic growth as companies take up AI tools.
Okay.
Among AI thinkers, a huge 88% thought this was very likely or likely to happen.
88%. Wow. And the public?
Well, that number drops quite a bit. Only 57% of the general public felt the same way.
That's a big difference, more than 30 points.
It's a really substantial gap, yeah. It suggests that, maybe those immersed in the tech see a clearer path to those economic benefits through businesses using AI.
Whereas the public might be a bit more skeptical. We're just unsure how it translates.
Perhaps, maybe wondering about the practicalities or, the potential downsides that might eat into those gains. It's not as clear-cut for them.
That makes a lot of sense. So the people closest see the potential, but maybe there's more uncertainty or, like you said, skepticism in the wider population about how those big numbers actually shake out.
Seems like it.
Okay, so alongside the economic side, the conference also really pushed the ethical considerations, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That was a very, very prominent theme. The takeaways specifically mentioned the importance of responsible AI development, data privacy.
Standard concerns, but important ones.
Crucial ones. And they stressed the need for continued dialogue around AI ethics and governance. So it's not a one-off discussion.
Right. It shows that the leaders, industry, and policymakers, they get that this tech isn't, value neutral. You have to think about the implications.
Exactly. They know careful thought is paramount here.
And looking at the survey again, it seems like the public has some pretty big ethical worries, maybe even more than the AI thinkers.
That's a really sharp observation. The survey data definitely shows significant public anxiety around several key areas.
Like what specifically?
Well, things like AI-generated misinformation or disinformation.
Yeah, that's huge right now.
And just how easy it is to create fake media. Both of those scored really high concern levels, 85% among the general public.
85%. Wow.
Yeah. And concerns about AI weapon systems were also high, 79%. And crucially, 78% were worried about AI potentially embedding or even, amplifying existing societal biases, discrimination.
Those are really serious numbers. It points to a widespread kind of unease, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About the potential downsides.
It really does.
How did the AI thinkers stack up on those? Were they less worried?
Their concern levels were generally a bit lower, yes, but still significant. It wasn't like they weren't concerned at all.
Okay.
So, for example, misinformation. 85% public concern versus 70% among AI thinkers.
That's high.
Still pretty high. AI weapons, 79% public, 70% thinkers. And the bias issue, 78% public versus 61% of AI thinkers.
Okay, so there's definitely a shared awareness of the risks across both groups. But maybe, a different level of worry. Or maybe the thinkers have more faith in finding solutions.
That could be it. Perhaps a differing degree of worry, or maybe, a stronger belief among those AI thinkers that technical fixes or, the right regulations can actually mitigate these risks effectively.
Okay, interesting. So we're seeing this sort of tension, aren't we, between the big economic hopes and these very real ethical fears.
Definitely.
Another key area always is the future of work, jobs. How did the conference and survey tackle that in the New Zealand context?
Well, the conference takeaway specifically flagged the importance of upskilling and preparing our workforce for an AI-driven future.
Right. A clear sign they expect changes.
It's a definite acknowledgement that AI integration is likely going to cause shifts in the job market. You need to be proactive, get people the skills for new roles, or maybe adapt their current ones.
And the survey, did it show different views between the public and the experts on how work will change?
It did, yeah. Quite interesting differences, actually. Clear majority of the AI thinkers, 68%, think people's work will be significantly impacted by AI within the next few years, yeah. That's a pretty strong consensus in that group about just how transformative AI could be for the nature of work itself.
And the general public.
They acknowledge an impact, but they seem a bit less convinced about the scale of the change happening so quickly. 41% thought the impact would be significant in the near term.
Lower, but still substantial.
Still substantial, yes. But here's a key point. When the survey asked specifically about concern over job losses due to AI, that figure shot up among the public. 77% expressed concern about job losses.
Okay, so that's fascinating. It sounds like the AI thinkers see a big shift in how work gets done.
Right, the tasks, the tools.
While the public might be more focused on the immediate worry,
yeah.
Will I lose my job altogether?
Exactly. It's a subtle difference in perspective, but a really important one when you think about shaping policy or public messaging around the future of work.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned earlier New Zealand's unique cultural context. Maori culture, values. I know the conference touched on this with AI.
Yes, and this is so critical. It's a really distinctive part of the AI conversation over there.
How so?
The conference explicitly stressed the need for inclusive AI development that considers Maori data sovereignty.
Okay, Maori data sovereignty.
And ensuring diverse cultural involvement and perspectives. This isn't just like a footnote. It's presented as a core principle for AI in New Zealand.
For listeners maybe not familiar, could you just quickly unpack why that concept, Maori data sovereignty, is so central there?
Sure. Basically, it recognizes that Maori have inherent rights and interests when it comes to their data.
Okay.
This data is often seen as a taonga, a treasure, a valued possession. And sovereignty means Maori control over how that data is collected, stored, used, shared.
Right. So it's about control and respect.
Exactly. And making sure AI development respects those principles is seen as fundamental for an equitable, culturally sensitive, inclusive approach to the tech in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Got it. That's crucial context.
And related to that, the conference also touched on challenges in like digital equity, access to AI across different communities.
Making sure everyone benefits, not just some.
Precisely. Avoiding making existing digital divides even worse.
Okay, so we're building this picture. Economic potential, ethical worries, work future, cultural inclusivity, lots of dimensions being discussed.
Yeah.
But that Talbot Mills survey, as we touched on, really seems to hammer home a pretty big difference in just the overall feeling about AI between the experts and the public.
That is definitely a key takeaway from the survey, yes. There's a noticeable gap.
How big a gap are we talking?
Well, the April 2025 data showed 61% of AI thinkers said they had a positive view of AI tools.
Okay, a solid majority.
Yeah, but compare that to the general public, only 28% felt positive.
Wow, less than half the rate.
Much less. And interestingly, that public positivity had actually dipped slightly since August 2023 when it was 29%. So it's not trending up among the public, at least not yet.
That's a really stark difference in just the basic perception. And I guess that feeling probably shapes how people think AI should be managed, regulated.
Exactly right. The survey shows a much stronger desire for government regulation among the public compared to the AI thinkers.
How much stronger?
Well, in April 2025, almost half the general public, 48%, said they thought AI poses a serious risk and needs heavy government regulation.
Okay, nearly half wanting strong oversight.
Yeah. Among the AI thinkers, that number was much lower, just 28%.
Big difference again.
It really suggests the public is looking for more, external checks and balances, more safeguards against the potential risks.
While the thinkers might be more confident in, self-regulation? Or maybe just the tech itself?
Possibly. Maybe a greater degree of confidence in managing it from within, or a different assessment of the actual level of risk needing that heavy intervention.
It almost feels like one group sees this huge potential that needs nurturing, careful guidance maybe, but nurturing.
Right.
And the other sees a powerful force that really needs to be carefully contained and controlled.
That's a good way to put it. And that difference in perception likely has real-world effects, right, on how quickly AI gets adopted and used in New Zealand.
You think so?
Absolutely. And the survey actually gives us a concrete example of that AI use in the workplace.
Okay, what did it find?
A much, much higher percentage of AI thinkers, 82%, said they use AI tools in their jobs.
82%?
Yeah.
That's nearly everyone in that group.
Pretty much. Now, compare that to the general employed public.
Let me guess, lower.
Much lower. 36% in April 2025.
Okay, 36%. Still more than a third, but way off the 82%.
Way off. Though it is worth noting that 36% was up from 26% back in August 2023.
So adoption is growing among the general workforce, just slower.
Exactly. There's an upward trend, but it's clearly lagging behind the pace set by the AI professionals and enthusiasts.
Which makes perfect sense, right? If you feel more positive about it, understand it better, you're probably way more likely to try it out, use it in your daily work.
Stands to reason, yeah.
Okay, now, amidst all these differences, were there any areas where both groups, the thinkers and the public, kind of saw eye to eye more on potential positive uses?
Yes, there were some areas of shared optimism, although even there, the AI thinkers usually showed, let's say, a bit more enthusiasm.
Okay, like what?
Well, both groups saw things like accelerated scientific research and discoveries and improved health outcomes as likely benefits from AI.
Good things most people would support.
Exactly. But again, the percentages differed. For scientific research, 85% of thinkers saw it as likely or very likely,
Right.
compared to 71% of the public. Still a majority, but lower.
Okay. And health outcomes.
Similar story, 79% among AI thinkers versus 73% for the public.
So even where there's agreement on the potential good, the level of conviction or optimism isn't quite the same.
Precisely. It still kind of underlines that central challenge, doesn't it? Bridging that gap in understanding and perception.
It really does.
And that's exactly the point the Talbot Mills survey wraps up with. They really emphasize how crucial education is.
Right.
Clear communication, providing reassurance to the public, all needed to try and align public perception better with the views of those working right at the coalface of AI.
Because the worry is.
The underlying concern seems to be that if you don't address this perception gap effectively, it could actually hold New Zealand back.
How so?
It could hinder the country's ability to really grab hold of those significant economic and societal benefits that AI could offer, the very benefits being talked about at that Labour Party conference.
Right. Public acceptance becomes a bottleneck for realizing the potential.
Potentially, yeah. You need that social license to operate, especially with powerful new technologies.
Okay, so as we sort of wrap up this deep dive into the New Zealand AI scene, what are the main things listeners should probably take away?
Okay, key takeaways. First, clearly the NZ government is being proactive, right? Engaging with AI seriously, shown by that conference. Second, the potential economic upside is huge, potentially transformative, but there's that split in optimism between experts and the public.
Got it.
Third, a really strong focus on ethics and, crucially, inclusive development respecting Maori data sovereignty, that unique NZ context.
Very important.
Fourth, the future of work is a big discussion point.
Right.
Thinkers see big shifts in how work is done, while the public worries more immediately about job losses.
Okay.
And finally, perhaps the biggest thread running through it all, that significant difference in overall feeling towards AI between the insiders and the general public.
Yeah.
And that difference colors everything. Perceived benefits, regulation, adoption rates.
It really shapes the whole landscape.
Yeah.
And it does seem like those first steps, like bringing all those diverse voices together at the conference, are about starting the conversation needed to navigate all this complexity.
Exactly. The dialogue's begun. Now it's about seeing how those discussions and how public feeling evolve actually shapes New Zealand's AI path forward.
It definitely leaves you thinking, considering that huge potential alongside the public's very real, understandable concerns. How do you navigate that? How can New Zealand, or any country really, push innovation while keeping public trust? It really makes you think about your own role, doesn't it? Your own understanding, your expectations, as this tech just keeps weaving itself more and more into our lives.
It's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Finding that balance.
Hey, thanks for checking out this week's episode of the Data Radio Show. It was really fascinating to be involved right from the start of this one, going down to the conference and seeing what information came out and what we ended up with as a product at the end with the help of AI. There were some really fascinating things and very little I had to correct, which kind of surprised me. So yeah, it was a fascinating journey. Anyway, make sure that you have already hit that subscribe button for the channel if you haven't done so already, or like the video, or feel free to share it. Don't forget, look after yourself, live long, prosper, be one with the force, and I will catch you guys all next time.